so inspiring to see you working. You know, हम जैसे लोग डर के बैठे हुए हैं घर पे, हम कॉलेज जाते हैं, पर आप लोग काम कर रहे हो. So there's a big inspiration for
We
people.
not stop a single day. We are working right there from the day one.
Yes, sir.
We understood. We read about the COVID virus.
Yes.
Talk here and there, and then I came to know what precautions to be taken.
Yes, sir.
So it is because now it is more. When we started on the first day, that time it was not that spreading. It was it was only in Delhi and Bombay. Now it is Amravati is very become a hotspot.
Very true, sir.
But if you take precautions, there is no problem. You can work.
Right, sir. Sir, आप basically, if I can just ask, I mean, we've got another 5 minutes to start. So, what is the general protocol that you're following? If you can just, you know, there are people who would be wanting to start. So, if
we have made a tunnel in the hospital where everybody comes and gets a shower from the sanitizer. And then they are checked for the temperature and SpO2. And they ask the history. And those who are fit, they're proceeded to the proper hospital. They come inside.
Okay.
And then we wear the PPE kit, double mask and double gloves, and we put a shield on it.
Okay.
And work. And
it's working.
So far, no problem.
I'm sure many people are going to use that. Even when we started, we were just planning to work immediately. In that particular week, there were suddenly a few cases. So that was something which got us scared, actually.
Yeah. Unfortunately, 2 of our colleagues got very positive. Okay. And one of my relatives also became positive.
Oh. Okay.
Dr. Bakhtar, you must be knowing, is a great physician. He came in contact with 3 patients and he got it.
Oh. Okay.
One of our pediodontist has got because of her granny. And one endodontist again.
Okay.
Mokar, he got uncle.
Oh.
So it is rampant, but we are taking a lot of precautions. We are just covered very tightly, and we are doing everything indirectly.
Sir.
Yeah.
So what about major cases? That also is happening?
Also we are doing, but we are doing isolation for at least 1 week, then COVID test, and then we are doing it.
Okay.
1 or 2 weeks isolation and COVID test, and then we are doing it.
Okay, sir. That is, I think that should be the protocol that one should follow, actually.
We are under the process. We are just learning. Let us see how far we. So far, God is great. We are not affected.
Sir.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Hi.
Good evening, Advani, sir.
Good evening. Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you.
Hi, Abhilasha. Good to see you.
Same here, sir. Same here. Hi, Nishit. All the very best.
Nishit, you are muted.
Okay, sir. Yeah. Thanks, Abhilasha. I don't know if Advani sir remembers me.
Hi, Irgani.
Yeah, we have met many times, but right now we have not met for a long time. We have met, so I remember you. Don't worry. We have gone in a very forgotten era. हम लोग ज्यादा बातें नहीं करते, काम करते रहते.
Sir, can you hear?
Yeah.
Sir, this is Dr. George Varghese from Kerala. Dr. George Varghese. Sir, Advani sir, I just want one clarification. You were telling that you will isolate the patient for a week and then do the COVID test. What is the importance of isolation?
Isolation, distancing, it has got its own importance for dining. So we tell their relatives not to go to this patient, don't make contact. He should be alone in the room, and then we do COVID test, and immediately we operate them.
Sir, they will stay in the house or they will be admitted in your ward?
They are in the house. We tell the relatives not to go with him. Don't make contact with him because he wants to get operated.
Sir, what are the usual cases you do in this COVID
We
period?
are doing all. Mostly we are doing cyst tumors and trauma and infections, space infections, so many. Space infection, of course, we are doing at, immediately. We are not even doing the COVID case. We are doing space infection with all precautions.
What about orthognathic? Orthognathic surgery?
Orthopedic work, we have got very less. We are already do it.
Okay, okay. Mainly emergency, like trauma and infections.
Yeah, so only emergency.
Okay, okay.
But
Thank you,
some
sir.
tumors, since they become emergency, we are doing it. Cancer
Yeah, yeah.
also we
Okay,
are
okay.
doing it.
Thank you.
Cancer also we are doing it.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you, Dr.
Thank
Varghese,
you, sir.
for joining.
Yeah.
Last president of AMSI joins. It's a big honor for us.
Oh.
Thank you so much.
Sir, I've
Thank
had
you, sir.
opportunity to assist him in a BSSO at FACE 2013.
Oh.
Okay, Nishit, I think
That-
we'll start.
I think we are not able to hear Hirkani. Been trying, I think. We could see her, but we couldn't hear her.
She was there.
Ask her to leave the meeting and come again. Same issue I had. Ask her to rejoin.
She rejoined and she could be seen. Before that, she could be heard.
You can message.
They're talking. Rama sir and Hirkani.
Nishit?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We have our CIMS, the office bearers who have joined. Varsha Manekar, Vrinda Kolte, Abhilasha. So they are the people who do a great job in everything. Abhilasha?
Yes, sir.
Abhilasha, Sheetal has a small problem with her audio. So what I'll do is Sheetal can join in, but unfortunately I don't have Nishit's CV. So I will tell you to read it out. Okay. So
Okay, sir.
yeah. So I'll just start the event. Thank you, Nishit, for consenting to give a talk on condylar fractures. And I know you, the work that you do. So you do great work in Mumbai and surrounding areas. And I've seen you in a workshop also, which we did last year. For Dr. Hirkani Attarde, or whom I call very fondly as Sheetal. Sheetal is a gold medalist from the MEHS. She was from the first batch of BSPM. She is also a great, dedicated, and a very diligent worker. Yeah, she's joined back. Just a minute. So she also does whatever she does with great dedication. We are very
Have
you joined? Mukul, hi.
Hi, Rama.
I knew you would
Hello,
be there.
sir.
Of course, I have to. I have to be there.
Sheetal, have you joined?
Hi, Nishit. All the best. All the best, dear.
Good evening, Mukul, sir.
Hi, good evening.
Sheetal, have you joined?
Hey, who's talking behind Rama? I can hear this mumbling.
Just 1 minute.
Ma'am's audio is on.
Sheetal.
अच्छा पाठांतर करते का काय ती
Hello, उधर वगैरह नहीं करत है. I was just
madam.
to all people. Hello, Nishit.
Hello, ma'am. How are you?
I'm fine. Nice to have you as speaker.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sheetal, have you started?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah. You please introduce Nishit so that we can start.
Yeah, I'm really sorry for that. I've logged in from my mobile. My laptop wasn't working. Okay. I'm really sorry for that. Okay. So, yeah, good evening, everyone. And So at the onset, I don't want to lose this opportunity. I would like to congratulate the entire team of CIA OMS for taking such a fantastic series of webinars, especially Rama sir, Vrinda ma'am, Varsha ma'am, Abhay sir, and ever dynamic Abhilasha. And what I really liked about this is, I'm sorry if I'm taking time, sir, is you have blended all the speaker, like all the youngsters, the experienced ones. You have local speakers, you had national and international speakers also. So thanks for giving us this opportunity, and thanks for making me the part of this webinar series. Now coming to today's topic, that is condylar fracture. Now, even this is being the most commonly occurring fractures of the facial skeletons, there always has been controversies, and I would say dilemmas when it comes to the management of the fracture. So today, to solve these problems or to discuss this topic, we have with us Dr. Nishit. And it's a pleasure, I would rather say it's a motivating and really inspirational to introduce one of my contemporaries who is doing such a wonderful job in the field of maxillofacial surgery. So I will just briefly read out his work. Just give me a second. Nishit has done completed his BDS from GDC Mumbai. After that, he has completed his post-graduation from SPDC Wardha. He has completed his fellowship from Nagarkoil in cleft lip and palate. He is practicing exclusive surgical practice in Mumbai since 2011. He is the director of Cleft Center in Mumbai, which is funded by German funds. He has around 9 international publications at his credit, and he has also contributed to the chapters in Dr. Borle's textbook, and also a salivary gland pathology chapter in the book published by JPs. His surgical interests are cleft surgeries, orthognathic, distraction osteogenesis, TMJ surgeries, and of course trauma. Currently, he is working as an associate professor in SMBT College of Dental Sciences in Ghoti. So I present to you Dr. Nishit Agni, and the screen is all yours, Nishit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hirkani, for that brief introduction. I will thank all the CIOMS scientific committee and Shenoy sir for giving me this opportunity. I will not go into too much of talking. We will just start with the topic here. I'll be presenting my perspective on management of condylar fractures. Since I was told that there is more of a postgraduate crowd, I will be having a lot of literature review in it. Okay, we'll be covering the topic under these heads as introduction, applied surgical anatomy, mechanism of injury, etiology of the fracture, clinical indicators, imaging, classification, decision-making, management, complications, and a small concluding note. We all know that, just give me a moment. We all know that the mandible is the largest, strongest, and the heaviest of the facial bones. And it is the only facial bone which moves, which has mobility, and hence it is the most traumatized bone, with approximately 61% of the facial fractures being contributed by the mandible alone. Now, in the mandible, the most common fracture is a condylar or a subcondylar fracture. Now, management principles in condylar fractures vary significantly from other. Hello?
Yes, continue, Nishit, continue.
Okay. Fine. So management principles significantly vary as compared to the other fractures in the facial skeleton, because functional rehabilitation is possible even if there is no anatomical reduction of the fracture, and this is attributed to the remodeling capacity of the temporomandibular joint area. We'll go into a short surgical anatomy and applied anatomy basically. We know that mandible is a tubular bone which is V-shaped, and hence it is strongest at the center, weakest in the ends. Now this strength is basically due to the thick cortical bone, which is more thicker in the anterior and the lower border as compared to the posterior border where it thins out. Now the condyle is shaped in such a way that it has a narrow neck and a broad head. Now the broad head of the condyle is usually thicker mediolaterally as compared to anterior-posteriorly, and then your neck is generally thinner. So this is the weak point in the mandible. Now this anatomical variation or anatomical aspect of the mandible is a protective mechanism by nature. So when you have a hit on the mandible, you have the condyle which fractures first so as to avoid fracturing the middle cranial fossa. That is at the glenoid fossa, where you have a very thin bone. Now, just to complete the anatomy, we know that the condylar area or the temporomandibular joint has a thick fibrocartilage covering it and a meniscus which divides the temporomandibular joint into a superior and an inferior joint space. The entire joint is covered by thick fibrous capsule which attaches superiorly to the margin of the glenoid and inferior to the condylar neck. So now this fibrous capsule is the one which decides whether the condylar fracture or the fractured fragment gets displaced medially or laterally. Now, laterally, the capsule is thick as compared to the medial side, and hence lateral displacements are lesser. In addition, you have the lateral pterygoid muscle which attaches to the neck of the condyle at the pterygoid fovea, and that is where the pull, anterior pull, is responsible for the anteromedial displacement of the condylar segment. The sphenomandibular and the stylomandibular ligaments are the collateral ligaments which will avoid lateral dislocation of the joint, but that is only when it is unfractured. You have a parotidomasseteric fascia which overlies the joint capsule, and it laterally and tightly adheres to the inferior aspect of the zygomatic arch. So this is another most important anatomical barrier there, which is now covered with superficial investing fascia, which houses the facial nerve. So any dissection below your parotidomasseteric fascia will tend to protect the branches of the facial nerve. Just a small brief of what you encounter during the surgical maneuvers. On the face side or on the lateral side, you have the superficial temporal vessels and the facial nerve. Whereas medial to the condylar neck, you have your maxillary vessels, or maxillary artery. And as you see with the red zigzag mark, that's the lateral pterygoid muscle, which is attaching to the neck of the condyle. TM joint lies in a very rich neurovascular area. So every vessel which comes in that area in say 1 to 2 centimeters of diameter around the condyle gives some of the other blood supply to the condyle. So it has very rich vascular supply. But the most important supply to the actual head of the condyle is from a medullary branch which comes out to the inferior ulnar artery. So once the inferior ulnar artery enters into your mandibular foramen, it gives off a superior branch which supplies the head of the condyle. Secondary supplies from the vascular plexus in the TMJ capsule and from branches into the lateral pterygoid muscle. Now, wherever I have some contradictory work, it is all mentioned with their references, from which article, which study it is taken. Because if you read a text, it says the blood supply of the condyle, it gives a very broad blood supply that is from the superficial temporal artery, the transverse facial artery, which is a branch of the superficial, and you have branches of the maxillary artery. But then the actual blood supply from where it is derived is given in this slide. The auriculotemporal nerve, which is a branch of the fifth cranial nerve, it's a sensory branch to the skin of the pinna and the surrounding area. It passes posterior to the condylar neck. So it is a structure which gets damaged during trauma a lot of times. The temporal and zygomatic branches of the facial nerve are at a higher risk when we are using a preauricular nerve, because you have your facial branch which goes up around the condyle, and the marginal mandibular is at risk when you give a submandibular approach. This is a picture from Peter Quinn's atlas, which shows that the temporofacial division, which is one of the branches, which is a thicker branch from the facial nerve, trunk of the facial nerve, is approximately 1.5 to 2 centimeters or nearly 3 centimeters near the condylar neck. And that is where is the fracture area usually. So when you are operating a condylar fracture, in case you go in for a surgical treatment, the facial nerve is the one which will always be encountered, and protecting it is very essential. Just the dimensions that I just spoke of. Marginal mandibular nerve runs inferior to the lower border of the mandible in 81% of the cases behind the facial artery. So now this is important because when you're taking a submandibular access, you will have to go to 2 centimeters below the lower border, or you say 2 fingers below the lower border. And it is usually the subplatysmal plane. That is why your dissection, in case you go for a subplatysmal dissection, you have to make sure that you are 2 centimeters below, otherwise you might cut it. Whereas in the anterior area from the facial artery onwards, in 100% of the cases, it is above the inferior border. We come to the mechanism of injury. Now, you rarely have a direct trauma leading to fractures of the condyle because you have your zygomatic arch which protects it. So most common incidences is from an indirect trauma. Now, like we spoke of the condylar neck having an anatomical importance where it fractures in priority before the medial cranial fossa can fracture. Similarly, if you have your teeth in occlusion during the time of trauma, then there is a higher chance that your teeth fracture before the condyle. So you can have vertical fractures of the teeth. Now, degree of injury in the condylar area will depend upon whether you have trauma with your mouth open or with your mouth closed. Mouth open, higher incidences of condylar fractures, whereas with mouth closed, since your teeth take away a lot of the force, they tend to vertically fracture. In such cases, you might just have some soft tissue contusions in the condylar area in the joint. Just a photograph showing a vertical fractured premolar. Etiology, fall on the chin, where you can have bilateral or unilateral condylar fractures. Assault to the body area can give fracture in the body, ipsilateral body and the contralateral subcondyle. An assault to the parasymphysis can give you an ipsilateral condylar fracture. The common patterns are one side body or parasymphysis with the opposite condyle, bilateral parasymphysis, bilateral condyle, which is very typical in case of a dashboard injury. Symphysis with bilateral condyle is common with parade ground or guardsman fracture. And isolated condylar fractures, either unilateral or bilateral, may also be there. A couple of examples. This is your parasymphysis and bilateral condyle. A right subcondylar with a symphysis fracture. Clinical indicators of fracture. So when you have a patient with trauma, when do you actually, since it is not an open fracture, to diagnose, you need to have something in mind where you can gauge if at all the patient has fracture, whether you want to really investigate further. So patient with chin laceration is at a higher risk of having a condylar fracture. Hematoma in the temporomandibular joint or bleeding from the external auditory canal. Because the external canal is right above the condyle, sometimes you might have a condylar fracture and the ragged end of the bone might go and lacerate the external auditory canal. That is when you'll have bleeding. And sometimes you might just have bleeding without fracture of the condyle. Difficulty in mouth opening is because of muscle spasm from the masseter and the pterygoid. That's the pterygomasseteric sling area. Facial asymmetry and deviation of chin will occur when there is shortening on one side. That is in case of a unilateral fracture. You will have deranged occlusion with unilateral fracture as well as bilateral fracture. So in case of a unilateral fracture where there is reduction in the height, you will have an opposite open bite. That's a contralateral open bite. And when you have bilateral condylar fractures, you have a posterior gagging of occlusion. So you have contacts only in the posterior teeth with your anteriors open. That's an anterior open bite. Just a small CBCT showing bilateral condylar fractures with a marked anterior open bite. Now this is nearly a month-old trauma. The patient is scrubbed later. And there is posterior gag of occlusion, if you notice. There will always be some pain and tenderness on the joint, crepitations over the joint. A compression test will, in case all the others are absent, say you have just a condylar head fracture, a compression test where you ask the patient to open mouth against resistance will be an indicator for a condylar trauma. And inability to perform lateral excursive or protrusive movements. This is one of the most key indicators where you suspect the patient to have some condylar fractures. We can take questions here if you wish to.
Hello.
Yeah, Hirkani.
Yeah, Nishit, there is only one question. You can go ahead, I guess, and after some time we'll take question. Is that fine with you?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Okay. So now,
Nishit,
since we have...
Nishit,
yes, sir.
Mayank has raised his hand. Mayank, you want to ask something?
No, sir, it's just by mistake.
Mayank, what you can do is you can send a text to me or in the chat box. I think that's
by mistake.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
No, he did it by mistake, he's saying.
Okay. So now that we have a clinical diagnosis where we are suspecting a condylar fracture, next stage is to go for imaging. Now, in best as of today is a CT, but then imaging will have to be at two perpendicular planes. So if you're looking at regular X-rays, an OPG or a lateral oblique, whichever is available, because an OPG is basically two lateral obliques, and a PSCAL or a Townes view. So these two will be at perpendiculars to each other, or a CT scan, a regular medical CT, a 3D CT face, a CBCT, and in case you wish, an MRI to assess the soft tissue damage inside the disc. MRIs are used.
I think there's something wrong with Nishit's.
Yeah, I thought my connection is bad, but I lost him. I'll call him up and I'll check.
Yeah, he'll figure it out. He'll figure out some way.
Okay.
He's still there? No, Nishit is there.
Rama, he may be talking and he doesn't know we are not listening.
Very true.
That's
Sir,
possible.
I've called him. Just
Someone call him.
I think his network gave way. So
must be trying to log in again.
Yeah. So Mukul, you are also an expert in condylar fractures.
Sir, bye-bye.
I think Nishit has done this on purpose so that all the seniors can give their ideas.
Yes. No, Mukul, seriously.
Yeah. Rama, tell me.
Kushal Gangwani wants to know that the absolute practical indications for opening the condylar fracture.
Absolute indication.
Yes.
Okay, I think he should wait for that because he's just about started and he's still on surgical anatomy.
Yeah,
so
he was just about to come to that point.
I mean, I feel he'll come to that. That will be discussed. But according to me, it will be a condyle which is dislocated, not displaced. Dislocated or with glenoid fossa is one indication which I will always want to open the condyle. That if I were to name one indication.
Yeah.
But I'm sure Nishit will touch on that a little bit more.
I think I'm admitting everyone except Nishit.
Yeah.
Should I give him a call? Just wait, I'll just give him a call.
Yeah, I think
I've already called him. He's trying to log in.
Yeah,
okay.
So
no, he explained the surgical anatomy very well. In fact, why the condylar neck and how the fracture is different if the teeth are open and wide open and when the teeth are in occlusion, there is definitely a difference in the pattern we see, in the condyle, in the fractures, when teeth are apart and teeth are shut.
Yes.
So that will help for PGs in there.
Yeah, I think Nishit is back.
Yeah, he's joined. Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I don't know. Some issue with my connection.
Nishit, you put me in a tight spot. Rama Madhav Vaiva ghayal lagla. He thought I'm still a student.
No, sir.
20 years ago. So he started taking my Vaiva.
The thing is that I have to ask my boss whenever. Okay.
Welcome. Yeah.
So where did I miss out? Like, what was this screen? Were we on the CT scan from
Previous. You can start from the previous slide, Nishit.
Previous.
No, previous to this, I guess.
Imaging.
Yeah, right here.
Did you hear anything from imaging or?
At the most, it will be a revision for us. Don't worry. Go ahead. I think he's frozen again.
No, he's there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but you are freezing again.
Am I audible, sir?
Nishit,
Come to the...
audible,
yes, sir.
Yeah. You are audible, no problems. Let's see. Nishit, can you do a favor? Is it possible for you to forward your presentation to us so that...
Yes, sir. I'll just... so I'll mail it, I think.
No, either... I think I can run it from here in case if your voice goes,
No problem, sir. So just give me a moment. I'll just mail it to you.
Okay.
1 second, sir.
It's srshenoy@yahoo.com. SHENOI.
So 1 second.
Yeah.
Just give me a moment. Yeah. I don't know why this is happening. Currently,
we have talked about so many protocols. There are certain laws also, and one of them, the biggest law, is Murphy's law. So when you expect that things won't go bad, they'll possibly go for the worst. So this is what usually happens.
I don't know
how much you say.
Very true, Rama. In all the rehearsals, it will work well.
Yes.
And when the final time arrives, it will falter. So
Nishit,
it's okay, Nishit. It's happened to all of us.
Yeah.
No, sir. That's fine. So just tell me a mail ID. Now, I don't know if this entire big thing will come.
You have to compress your thing. I guess. You have to open it on Drive. Otherwise.
Open it on Drive. I don't know.
WeTransfer.
It's not working. WeTransfer is not working.
नहीं, निशित चल तू चालू रख देखते हैं कहाँ पे होता है.
नहीं हुआ तो just tell me. Then.
Okay.
Resume share. Yeah. Fine. So, I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Nishit.
Okay. Yes. So we will. I don't know. This is. 1 second. Now it has started. Okay. So imaging, we generally image in two perpendicular planes, either an OPG or a lateral oblique, and a PA skull or a Townes view. But the best imaging so far as of today is CT scan, a 3D CT face, or a CBCT. Anything is okay. And an MRI would be used in case you want to really screen the soft tissues in the joint. A couple of examples for the same. You have the condylar a condylar neck fracture or a subcondylar fracture, basically showing in a reverse Townes. Again, a subcondylar fracture, an OPG showing the same. Now here you can see that small double shadow in the top OPG. That's the condylar head fracture. An edentulous X-ray showing subcondylar fracture. Now, these are CTs. The best part about CTs is you can see it in all three planes, and you can even have a 3D reconstruction. It's easier to explain the patient on 3Ds. So the first coronal cut on the top shows a condylar head fracture or medial pole getting fractured, whereas the image just below it shows a condylar dislocated fracture on the left side. The central two photos, one is the axial view on top, which is same as the first left one, showing the medial pole fracture. And the lower one, which is a coronal view, shows a deviated fracture. And then you have a condylar base fracture or a subcondylar fracture in a 3D base. Pediatric fracture. These are just examples to show the imaging things. Classification, many classifications have been, one second. Many classifications have been proposed till date. Wasmund, 1934, Macklin, 1952, Roe-Kelly's, Spieselschroll, Lindahl system, 1977. Now, they have been classified, but current classification, which is most accepted, is by Lokuta. Now, there is also this old classification which says, based on the anatomic location, as extracapsular and intracapsular. Now, Lokuta in 2010 has suggested that the term intracapsular is not acceptable because the condylar head fracture need not always restrict itself inside the capsule. So it does extend beyond the capsule, and hence it should be referred to as a dicapitular fracture. Based on relations of the condylar segment to the mandibular segment and the glenoid fossa, we have these classifications which are traditionally there. You have an undisplaced fracture where you have a fracture, but the segment is in its own place. It is not displaced from the area. A deviated fracture where one cortex is still in contact. A displaced fracture where there is a proper displacement in the coronal view, either laterally displaced or medially displaced. And a dislocated fracture where the condylar fragment is out from the glenoid fossa. Ellis has classified these simply as condylar head, condylar neck, condylar base fractures. This is an AOCMF photograph which shows the head fracture, the neck fracture, which is high and low, and below the sigmoid notch line, you have a subcondylar fracture. The most accepted classification as of today is by Lokuta for the condylar subclassification, the condylar fractures. One is the dicapitular fracture that we just spoke, where you have the condylar head getting fractured. He has developed a line which is, the posterior line is drawn as a tangent to the ramus. And then you have a perpendicular line from the sigmoid notch. So based on that line, if your fracture is, fracture line runs in such a way that, if the fracture line runs in such a way that most of the fracture line is above this perpendicular, then it's a condylar neck fracture. If it is, most of it is below this perpendicular line, then it's a condylar base fracture. Okay. Then now there is a newer classification which he has given in 2010, which classifies only the dicapitular or the condylar head fractures. So you have a condylar fracture, that is type A, which runs only through the medial part, or it is a medial pole fracture. Type B, where it runs through the lateral part of the condyle, and type C, where it runs below the attachment of the lateral capsule. If at all there are any questions, or we move.
Hello.
Yeah, Hikani.
Yeah, Nishit, there have been only one question, and since you've spoken about indications, so there's one question which says, what are the absolute practical indications for open reduction of condyle?
I'll be coming to that. I don't think I've spoken of indications.
Nishit, there are no questions yet regarding topics that you covered. There are questions which will be dealing in the later part.
Right? Yes, sir.
Okay. Go ahead.
We'll come to the treatment part now. These are the treatment goals given by Walker in 1988. Walker is supposed to be Edward Ellis's boss in the same institute. And both of them have two diagonally opposite philosophies, where Walker has always propagated a non-surgical approach, and Edward Ellis has always propagated a surgical approach to management of condylar fractures. So the treatment goals according to Walker are having a reasonably normal, relatively pain-free range of movement after injury, a good occlusion and good symmetry of the mandible. Now, unlike other fractures, exact anatomic reapproximation of the fragments is not essential, as we've already spoken. Now, and even if you get a perfect radiographic reduction of the fragments and you do not have an adequate occlusion, then, or a relatively pain-free joint, it is not considered a successful surgery. Management of condylar fractures is still controversial, like it is the biggest controversy till date, and it includes observation, close treatment, open reduction with without endoscopic visualization of the fracture by either a transfacial or an intraoral approach. Now, the recent consensus is more favored towards an open reduction. Decision making. I might have a repetition of slides in between, a couple of points here and there, because I have been quoting articles somewhere. Decision making, either close treatment, where technically it is no treatment, it is observation, a soft diet, physiotherapy for the patient, a close reduction, which is a misnomer. Now, close reduction is no more used, or some people have also referred to as a conservative treatment. According to Ed Ellis, both the terminologies, a closed reduction is a misnomer because there is technically no reduction of the fracture when you do a closed treatment. And the term conservative is also a misnomer according to him, because when you talk of conservative treatment, it might not serve all the purposes of the, or it might not be able to give an outcome which is on par with the open reduction or the open treatment. So it does not certify that it is superior to the open treatment, and hence a conservative treatment is also not considered an appropriate term. So the best term is closed treatment or a non-surgical treatment with immobilization and physiotherapy, and open reduction internal fixation. The non-surgical management of fractured mandibular condyles, according to Robert Walker, is not wiring the teeth in occlusion for an extended period. It technically means that you restore the movement of the joint as early as possible and maintain the jaw in occlusion intermittently in the correct position. And the jaw motion is strictly supervised, healing is slowly occurring, and you try to achieve all the range of movement. What he means by intermittent maintenance of occlusion is by giving elastics only in the night and maintaining good occlusion in the night. Throughout the day, the patient's mouth is open and he is free to function, or he is advised to function. Close treatment, as I said, good indications would be good occlusion clinically. So there is no derangement of occlusion. There's a good range of movement of the joint, and there is no or minimal displacement of the fractured condyle on a radiograph. So in these cases, you need not intervene technically. You keep the patient under a good follow-up for the first 3 weeks, soft diet, range of motion exercises. Now, the patient has to be closely followed up to make sure that there is no derangement subsequently due to the exercises. Small example where there's a medial pole fracture, occlusion is not deranged. This patient was managed conservatively, as in not conservatively, it was managed without treatment, just observation. The patient might have a deviation of the jaw on maximal opening. So in such cases, you can either have a trans arch elastics. So from the left to the right, left lower to the right upper, whichever side you have a deviation, so that every time the patient moves, the elastics will keep on mobilizing it in the correct position, or the patient can even exercise, trying to get the condyle jaw movement without deviation. Close treatment and immobilization. Now it all depends on the level of fracture, degree of displacement of the condylar fragment, whether it is dislocated or not, presence of additional fractures, whether the patient is fit for GA, and obviously a financial implication patient's will. Techniques for immobilization are either arch bars or IMF screws, along with wire IMF or elastics. Now, it differs from center to center, person to person, whether they use arch bars or IMF screws, and whether they really want to put the patient into rigid IMF, or they are comfortable with elastics, with box elastics, and they try to guide. But a better way, or the currently more acceptable norm, is to put the patient on elastic so that there is no tight IMF, as well as there is the patient's occlusion is being guided. Use of a hypomocleon. Now, hypomocleon is used when you want to achieve the lost height. Say you have a unilateral condylar fracture and posterior gagging of occlusion. So in such a case, if you cannot develop an occlusion, a good occlusion during your immobilization period, the treatment goal is not achieved. Hence, we can use hypomocleons. It is basically a rigid, in either an impression compound or something where you would put on the posteriors and give an anterior elastic traction. So they will act as a point of fulcrum. They will rotate the occlusal level and get the occlusion right for the patient. The condylar head fracture, which was managed just by plain closed treatment and an IMF. IMF screws, this is from a text. A time period, how long should the IMF be, or how long should the joint be immobilized? It should be immobilized in such a way that there is a good amount of healing, as well as you are trying to get the patient back to full range of function as early as possible. Now, depending on the age, say in case of a pediatric population, it can be as less as 7 to 10 days. In case of an adult, 15 to 21 days. So at the end of 15 days, you could always open up the IMF and see if the occlusion can be achieved, if the patient's occlusion is stable, and then you could just put him on guiding elastics. The follow-up protocol will always require good amount of aggressive physiotherapy, range of motion exercises, and guiding elastics, at least for the next 3 months. Now, as I said, we will have to keep on having some repetitions. So these are acceptable jaw functions according to Robert Walker. Since we spoke of acceptable jaw function after closed treatment, his perspective is a pain-free mouth opening more than 40 millimeters. Good movement in all excursions, achieve pre-injury occlusion, achieve a stable TM joint, and good facial and jaw symmetry. This closed treatment is more applicable when you have a full set of teeth, or when you can achieve a good amount of occlusion there. Now, once closed treatment is done, your body, since we have not reduced the fracture anatomically in most of the cases, you will need some adaptations from your body, like how we spoke of the capacity of the temporomandibular joint to adapt. So you will have adaptations at neuromuscular levels, skeletal adaptations, and dental adaptations by means of intrusion exclusion of teeth. Complications of closed treatment or non-surgical treatment: you can have a deviation on opening. You can try to avoid or minimize that by using guiding elastics and by mobilizing the jaw in all excursions. Malocclusion: make sure that the patient is under good follow-up during the course of your treatment and achieve good primary occlusion during your immobilization. And TMJ ankylosis, that can be avoided by early functional mobilization. We come to open reduction internal fixation. Edward Ellis III is a strong proponent of the ORIF because according to him, there are lesser incidences of malocclusions, lesser time is necessary to achieve normal mouth opening and function, and surgical complications leading to permanent dysfunction or disability are uncommon with ORIF. Textbook slides, Zaid and Kent, open treatment. They have given you absolute and relative indications for open reductions. I will just skip this and go to the American Association of OMS Special Committee. This is a 2003 review by the American Association of OMS Surgeons, where they have given that indications for open treatment, physical evidence of fracture. That means you can open each and every fracture according to them. Imaging evidence of fracture, malocclusion, mandibular dysfunction, and abnormal jaw relationship. Presence of foreign bodies, laceration or hemorrhage in the EAC, hemotympanum, CSF photoria, effusion, hematrosis. So basically they have included all possible indications for open reduction. current indications as given by Likith Reddy and Curtis Bishop in their book, Abscess of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgery, edited by Deepak Kademani and Paul Tivana. Now, they have said that in case of bilateral fractures, you should preferably go in for open reduction. Considerable dislocation. Dislocated joints should really be plated. When closed treatment can't re-establish stable occlusion. Concomitant fracture of other facial bones, foreign bodies, and dislocation into middle cranial fossa. Now, initially, when I had read, we had the Zeiden-Kent criteria that in case of bilateral fractures, at least one fracture should be treated open. Our current consensus says that why one? You can even plate two if they are possible. Now, Valiati et al. Has given absolute contraindications in 2008 that if at all the condylar head fractures above the ligamentous attachment, or if there is a comminuted pole or a medial pole fracture, then you need not do an open reduction. If there is a medical illness or systemic injury where you require additional G or an extended G and the patient cannot take it, obviously then you cannot go in for open reduction. A good occlusion, minimal pain, acceptable mandibular movement, I think that's more or less acceptable to everybody. Relative contraindications when a simpler method is as effective. Condylar neck fracture which is not dislocated, and a neurologic status where there is no chance of improvement of the patient. Basically, you don't expect that the patient is going to come back to normal function, in which case then you could avoid a surgical intervention for it. Now, this recommendation is given by Neff in 2014 that condylar process fractures should undergo an open reduction within 10 days after fracture, or maximum up to 3 weeks after injury, because after that you'll have a lot of fibrous tissue and it will be difficult to really get the fractured condyle or the fragment back into its position. This is this nice paper by Edward Ellis to decide whether you need to go ahead with a closed treatment on table. So in case of multiple fractures, anyways, the sequence of reduction by Edward Ellis is for the dentate fragment first. So once your dentate segment, you've put into occlusion, you've plated the other mandibular fractures. After that, you open the IMF and try to put the joint into occlusion, put the mandible into occlusion. If it is easily possible, then you might avoid an open reduction according to Edward Ellis. In case if the mandible drops back or if the mandible deviates and you're not able to put it into occlusion, that is a good enough indication to opt for an open treatment of the condylar fracture. We'll come to the surgical approaches. Now, the surgical approach for an open reduction internal fixation is dictated by the level of the fracture, whether it is a condylar head, neck, subcondyle, surgeon's experience and skill level, and degree of the fracture displacement, dislocation, patient desires, and complication risk. Reduction and fixation. Now, the proximal fragment, that is the condylar head area, can be manipulated using a hemostat or an Alice forceps, bone clamps, hook screw to hold it securely depending on the size of the fragment. The condylar fragment is usually displaced anteromedially due to the lateral pterygoid pull.
Nishit?
Yes, sir.
There are a few questions pertaining to close reduction.
Yes, sir, we'll take that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should I read out to you?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, these all are pertaining to the indications and contraindications. Okay. So first is somebody wants to know about the different color-coded elastic, the guiding elastics. So are there any force decay about it, and what is your protocol? What do you follow, and which color code do you use, and for which type of a condylar fracture you use that?
Which type of a condylar fracture color coded? See, all the elastics that are available are basically your orthodontic elastics. Till date, I have used only red elastics for all my cases, which have a higher, the smaller elastics, which would help me guide the patient into occlusion. I have never tried using those green and the blue ones. What was the other part of the question?
Okay. Then someone wants to know about the force decay in these elastics.
No. I
have you experienced any force decay? Like, how often do you change this? I guess somebody want to ask this. Do you change them, and is there any force decay in these elastics or traction?
I have not really experienced anything of that sort, because the patient is not going to maintain it for a week or 10 days with the same elastic. The more number of elastics you give him, the more number of changes he has. But then on an average, every 2 or 3 days, there is no issue changing the elastic. It's not a very expensive thing to do.
Okay, so do you change it? How often do you take the follow-up? That I'm asking you this. How often? I guess weekly once, and then twice once in 2 weeks. Right?
No, depends on what is the modality. If it is just a guiding elastic,
right?
If it's just a guiding elastic, then he can see me once a week for the first 3 weeks.
Right.
If I have tried a closed treatment, and if I have put him into tight occlusion with elastics, box elastics, then he can directly see me after 2 weeks.
Okay. And they basically, this person wants to know which type of fracture, like if you have a right condylar fracture, so what kind of elastic will you give to that patient? I guess he means that, like, will you give on the ipsilateral side, contralateral side, box elastic? That is what he wants to know, I guess.
It depends on what he wants to achieve. If there is no occlusal, if there is no occlusal derangement, and if the patient can open his mouth good, wide open with excursions with no deviation, I will not give him any elastic. But say if there is a left condylar fracture, obviously deviation will be towards the left, right, on opening. If I want to correct it from left to right, I will give a cross elastic from the left lower to the right upper. So every time he opens, the mandible will try pulling it, the elastic will try pulling it on the opposite direction.
Okay, I guess you answered that. Okay. And the other question, which was the first question, I think you answered that in your indication, the practical indication somebody wanted to know, that you have explained it, I guess.
Okay.
All the practical indication to open a condyle.
Practical indication to open a condyle, practical indication is exposure, as in surgical exposure.
Surgical exposure, yes.
Yeah, that's the most practical indication whether you want to go, because at the end of the day, even if it's you're using a preauricular or a retromandibular, at the end you are going to encounter the facial nerve. So how confidently you can go ahead, or how trained you are with the process is what will dictate. So the best thing for beginners is you start with lower fractures. So as and when you start doing more and more cases, automatically your skill improves, your confidence improves. It is all about confidence and then the skill, and not the overconfidence.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah,
can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay, fine. Yeah, your voice was cracking in between, but can you hear me now? There's one more question. Yeah. The other question is pertaining to the approaches and all. First, we'll take the question which are pertaining to the indications, I guess, because you covered that. Somebody's asking, like, in all the other mandibular fractures, the IMF is for 6 weeks if at all are doing a close reduction, but why for 3 weeks only for condyle? I guess it's a common sense, like you don't want ankylosis, or you want a good range.
Why do you really want to put the patient in IMF for other dentate fractures? That's the biggest question.
Right. Okay, so that's all. Other are all pertaining to the surgical access and the fixation. So I guess you go ahead.
Sorry, Hirkani, just 1 minute.
Yeah.
Shruti wants to know she wants you to explain adaptation of condylar fractures in detail.
Adaptation of condylar fractures in detail.
Yeah, I mean, just if you could just throw some more light on it.
Okay. As in the neuromuscular and those three aspects.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we are talking of the neuromuscular adaptation in a condylar fracture, basically adaptations is most usually pertaining to close treatments. Okay. So when you have a condylar fracture and you do a close treatment, you are not reducing it back to its anatomical position. Now there is a lot of adjustments by the neuromuscular. So you have your temporalis, your masseter, and your medial pterygoids, which help in movement of the temporomandibular joint, right? So now what you mean by neuromuscular adaptation is, if you have a condylar fracture, now that there is no more stress bearing over there.
Yeah.
Now the stress load, if you have closed reduction of condylar fractures, the patient can still chew well. Patient can open his mouth well. Now this here, when you are talking of these adaptations, the muscles adapt in such a way that the vector of the muscle pull changes. The direction in which it has maximum pull changes. For example, say when you are having a bite from your front tooth, the muscle at play or the temporalis at play is directed upwards. If you're biting posterior, the superior temporalis muscle pulls your condylar, the coronoid backwards. So that is how it will try to manage the opening and closing of the joint. That's a neuromuscular adaptation.
Yeah.
Skeletal adaptation is by formation of heterogeneous bone on the lateral fractured area. You'll have hibernation of the edges. You'll have a pseudoarthrosis.
Okay.
Okay.
And final is your dental compensation. So if you have some amount, this is what your orthodontist does, no? At the end of the day, they say settling of occlusion as the last stage of their orthodontic treatment. So wherever you have some amount of open bite post-surgery, you will have your teeth supra-erupting into occlusion. If you have some contact which is as an initial contact, those teeth will try intruding. So that is your dental adaptation to this. And if you really want,
we have
one more question. Ramasa, can I ask? Can I go ahead? One more question.
I was just completing it.
Yeah. There's one more question he is asking. Is there any age-related guidelines regarding the decision-making in the management of condylar fracture?
Yes, it will come.
Yeah. Okay.
The
So
last slide.
Ratan has joined.
Okay.
Go ahead, Nishit. You seem to be drawing all big wigs to your talk. Please go ahead.
So no wonder my internet connection is unstable today. Okay, I think we were here. Decision on closed treatment. Yeah. Yes. So we'll go to the decision on. Yeah. Decision on closed treatment. Right. Now, I did explain this. So if after your closed after your open reduction of the other fractures, if at all you are able to move the mandible right into occlusion passively, you can think of leaving the condylar fragment alone, the condylar fracture alone as closed treatment. When we talk of closed treatment, here he is not speaking of IMF post-operative. It is just physiotherapy, mouth opening exercises and the range of motion exercises. Whereas in case after you have properly fixed all the other fractures in the mandible and maxilla, and if the mandible drops behind or it deviates, you're not able to achieve a good occlusion, it is a clear indication that you should be going in for open treatment of the condylar fracture. Surgical approaches, I think we just spoke that it depends on the surgeon's experience, level of fracture, and the degree of fracture displacement. Reduction fixation, we did speak. Condylar fragment, which is anteromedially displaced, usually there's the proximal fragment, can be manipulated using either a hemostat or an Alice forceps, a bone clamp, hook, screw, or you can just try pulling it up with your periosteal elevator. And the mandible has to be distracted because now once you have your condyle which gets fractured, you have shortening of the ramus height there. And because of the shortening, because of your pterygomandibular pull, it is very difficult to retrieve the medially displaced fragment. That is when you need to technically distract the mandible downwards. So you have some space there, you can go and pull it out. Now this can be done in case you're doing a submandibular approach. It's easier. You have access to the ramus or the angle of the mandible. You can either put a bone clamp or you can put a wire and pull it down, distract it. But in case you're using a retromandibular approach, you can drill a screw into the ramus, put a wire around the screw, which comes out in the angle area, and that can be pull down to distract the mandible. I think this is given in the AO thing. Right? Internal fixation principles. Beat-Hammer in 1997 has evaluated fixation of the condylar segment using a single mini plate, and he's found that because of the adverse pull of the lateral pterygoid and the functional force acting on the proximal fragment, that is the condyle, the rigidity of single mini plate is lesser, and hence there can be screw loosening and plate failure. So he has advocated fixation of two plates, one along the posterior on the lateral side and one along the sigmoid notch. Now, maximum compression forces are usually at the posterior edge of the condylar fracture, and tensile stresses on the anterior side. The various types of geometric plates. This is from literature, right? Strut plates, lambda plates, trapezoidal. There is something known as a delta plate as well. Okay, so these plates can also be used. They more or less give you three-dimensional stability for the condyle. So depending on how much of bone stock you have in the condylar fragment, you can decide what plate to use. However, decision, as I said, based on whether you can put a single plate or two plates will depend on the fracture morphology and availability of bone in the proximal fragment and the surgeon's preference. In addition, whether you can technically put it over there. Sequence of fixation. There are two schools of thoughts here when you have multiple fractures or additional fractures apart from the condylar fracture. One school of thought says that you fix the condylar fracture first, and then you put the patient in occlusion and try to fix the dentate fragment. So their philosophy is, if you are not able to fix the condyle in absolute correct anatomical form, whatever management you need to do can be done during fixation of your dentate segment. Edward Ellis is of an opposite view. He says you fix the dentate fragment in the anatomic position and then you fix the condyle, you will never go wrong. So I usually follow Ellis. So I fix the dentate segments first and then open up the condyle. So you can reduce the condyle, then put the patient back into IMF so that you don't miss it. Okay. Now we'll come to approaches. Now this is a recent article, 2018 in the Journal of Craniomaxillofacial Surgery, which gives you approaches. Right? One is intraoral approach. Either it is strictly intraoral or with a transbuccal trocar or with endoscopic assistance. A lower submandibular or a normal submandibular Risdon approach, where you have your two-finger margin. A periangular or a high submandibular approach. This is a newer approach where you are very close to the lower border. A retromandibular approach, it can either be retroparotid or behind the parotid. It can be transparotid. It can be anterior parotid, transmesenteric. Okay. You can have a retroauricular approach. Retroauricular approach is usually helpful only for the condylar head fractures. But the biggest issue with the retroauricular approach is you have to cut through the external, the cartilaginous part of the external auditory canal. So you can, you tend to have some EAC stenosis. And the preauricular approach, again, now preauricular approach can have either transparotid dissection or it is anterior parotid. Okay, with where you go in front of the parotid, or you don't go through the parotid. We'll discuss a couple of those. Preauricular approach or endoral approach, they are nearly the same, just that the skin incision varies. Preauricular is in the preauricular skin crease, whereas the endoral goes inside the helix. Okay, it goes behind your tragus, so most of the incision is hidden. But then even a preauricular approach gives you a good scar because it's in the crease. The things to watch out over here is your superficial temporal artery, the auriculotemporal artery, which is on the posterior side of the condylar neck, and obviously the facial nerve, the temporofacial division. Now the standard preauricular approach, I will discuss in details. Either that's preauricular fold. These are the various variations that people have given. Alcath-Bramley has given a superior extension. A modified incision along the inner edge of tragus has given by Rasse in 1992, and a completely endoral by Ruiz. Right? We come to the standard preauricular from Dr. Ed Ellis's book, right, this diagram. You go in through your skin subcutaneous fascia and you reach your parotidomasseteric fascia and the temporal fascia. The 45-degree angulation cut is at the temporal, above your zygomatic arch into the temporal fascia, the superficial layer. Once you've hit your zygomatic arch, then the dissection is all below it. So with this, I think in the anatomy, if you remember, we've discussed that your facial nerve is above the parotidomasseteric fascia. So once you're below the parotidomasseteric fascia, you can just raise it and give a posterior cut and expose the temporomandibular joint. Now this preauricular will be helpful only to plate either the condylar head or high condylar neck fractures. As the fracture goes down onto the lower condylar neck, it is difficult to place screws in the lower side or the distal fragment. Okay, so this is a small example for the preauricular. Okay, with the two plate fixations.
Hello, Nishid.
Yes, sir.
Are you really compatible with this incision?
Preauricular for the so this is I have done probably quite some time back.
We have to give most of the time the temporal extension.
No, sir, I have not taken a temporal extension recently.
This it is not possible to put two plates because condyle is very medially displaced, and if you just struggle, and then you get an encounter beginning from the intermaxillary. So to manage intermaxillary, we give the temporal extension, a large temporal extension like background, and then we are very comfortable playing with the condyle and intermaxillary.
Okay, sir. And so this is preauricular through the transparotid. Here, I'll just enlarge it. Yeah. So here in the third picture, you can see a parotid tissue just near the iliac. Unfortunately, I can't have my cursor here to show. Right. Caution for these is facial scar usually does not bother. Auriculotemporal nerve damage is possible, giving some sensory loss to the pinna. Facial nerve damage is possible, like how Vadwani sir was saying that it's difficult to access from a small incision, and it should be used only for a higher level fracture, either a condylar neck, a high neck, or a condylar head. And during dissection, there is always a chance that you damage the external auditory canal if you're not careful. Can lead to perichondritis and stenosis. We come to the retromandibular approach. As I said, you can either have a transparotid or a retroparotid and a transmesenteric anterior parotid approach. I have not tried the retroparotid or the transmesenteric anterior parotid. I have used the transparotid approach usually. Here the anatomical consideration would be the facial nerve, retromandibular vein, and obviously the parotid tissue. Again, photos from Ed Ellis' book. Now you have your incision behind the ramus of the mandible. So it is hidden. Go through the skin subcutaneous fascia and you reach your parotid fascia. Once you have cut the parotid fascia and you can see your parotid lobules or the parotid gland, that is when the dissection is more or less blunt. The division or the direction of the nerve is more or less known to us. So you try to dissect with a blunt hemostat in between the nerve branches. Once you've hit the mandible, incise the periosteum and raise it so you can access the fracture. Now, once you have dissected into the parotid, you can introduce two retractors and try enlarging the opening. So there it is more or less blunt dissection. Your facial nerve, if encountered, can be picked up in either of the retractors, either the posterior retractor or the anterior retractor, where you try and protect it as much as possible. Now, since I don't have too many people working with me, or rather nobody else working with me, I don't have too many photographs to show stepwise. But this is the retromandibular transparotid approach, okay, where it can be used for a lower fracture. Okay, if it's a subcondylar fracture like this, currently I would prefer using a periangular approach. The same patient, two plates. Okay, transparotid another year I have gone transparotid for a condylar displaced fracture as well, a dislocated fracture. This was anteromedially dislocated fracture. Old indications where we were taught that in case of bilateral fractures, you should plate at least one fracture. So that is what I had done initially. So this is again a bilateral fracture plated unilaterally, 2 plates. The 2 X-rays basically, luckily this patient came back to me after 3 years. So I had a follow-up X-ray as well. Scar, barely perceptible. If at all it is there, it goes behind, so it is not visible clearly. Facial nerve injury is possible, but most of the times it is just traction injury and recovers within the first 3 months or 6 months at the max. A silocele or a salivary fistula is possible. In case to avoid it, you need to properly close the parotid fascia. In case a silocele forms, now I don't have a photograph, but this patient did have a silocele. Aspiration of the silocele and a pressure dressing usually solves the purpose. As I said, indicated for a condylar neck fracture. We come to the submandibular approach. Submandibular approach is usually for lower fractures, which can be approached from the lower side, right, from the lower edge of the mandible. Anatomical considerations would be the marginal mandibular nerve and the facial vessels. Again, the classical submandibular or the residence, you leave 2 fingers below the lower border so that you avoid cutting the marginal mandibular. Dissection is done up to the platysma. Platysma is divided and then you go subplatysmal. So your marginal mandibular nerve is picked up in the skin flap below the platysma. And once you've reached the paratidomasseter, the masseter and the pterygoid junction, that is the lower border, pterygomasseteric sling, that is what you divide, dissect the, raise the masseter, and you've reached the ramus and the condylar fracture, right? As I said, usually done for lower fractures, condylar neck fractures. It's again a very old picture where we had placed 1 plate and a posterior border wiring was done for the patient. This is probably during my first year of lecturership at Varda. I don't use steel plates nowadays. Caution for a submandibular approach is a marginal mandibular nerve injury and all, as I said, used only for lower subcondylar fractures. Periangular approach, I've used it in a couple of cases, but I don't have photographs. Now the skin incision here is close to your lower border. You incise the skin and the subcutaneous tissue. You do not incise the platysma. Your dissection will be supraplatysmal, up to 1 centimeter above the lower border of the mandible. Once you've gone supraplatysmal, that is when you will enter the platysma. So you've gone above the marginal mandibular. If at all you see it, you can preserve it. If not, you technically don't try to see it. Once you've gone up, that is when you enter, dissect into the masseter, raise the masseter and reach the fracture site. So you can reach lower subcondylar fractures or lower neck fractures through periangular approach as well. Intraoral approach, never tried it. It was described by Steinhauser in 1964, where he's placed an incision along the external oblique ridge up to the second molar, raised a flap, raised masseter up to the sigmoid notch. And he's distracted the mandible to locate the proximal fragment and plate it. Okay. In case of difficulty, he's done a posterior ramus osteotomy, removed it, removed the condyle, plated it extracorporeally, and then put back the fragment. But this extracorporeal fixation has a risk of avascular necrosis. So I don't know if many people really do it these days, but for theoretical purposes and completion purposes, it has been included. Intraoral endoscopic repair needs special training with endoscopic use. It's a minimal access surgery, technically. Needs special equipment with the 30 and 45 degree endoscopes, a 90 degree screwdriver and special retractors to reach the condyle. Better used for laterally displaced and lower fractures to begin with, and then maybe as you develop more and more skill, you can try doing it for higher points. So we'll be going into controversies. Any questions till now?
Yeah, Nishi, there are a lot of questions pulling in now. So the first question I would ask you that is, I wanted to ask you that basically, you would also agree with me that there's the bilateral condylar fracture with the parasymphysis, that is typical parade ground fracture, is one of the most difficult fractures.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So what is your experience with that, and what do you do to minimize that wishbone effect, like widening of the width of the face? So do you use any special maneuver or techniques to minimize that effect, and what is your experience in that? How do you sequence sequence your fractures while fixing it?
Sequence, as I said, I follow Ed Ellis, so I always
so
do the dentate
one.
fragment first.
Okay.
Dentate fragment first.
Okay.
The wishboning, you can always apply pressure if you want to avoid widening of the flaring of the mandible. You can apply pressure on the angle area.
Okay. Okay. Right.
So second thing, what you can do is you can try moving a periosteal elevator on the underside, on the lingual cortex side, to make sure that there is no gap left there.
Okay. Do you overbend your plates, like sort of things? And
I've not tried, but after I attended the AO course, I've started using thicker plates, the reconstruction type plates, and for the lower border, one plate, and probably locking screws.
Okay, great. I guess Ashok sir is there, so I welcome Ashok sir at this webinar. It's great to have you here, sir. Sir, do you have anything to add, Ashok sir? Okay.
Can I talk?
No.
Sir,
Hi, Nishid. Hi. I agree with you. Yeah,
tell of your overbending of your plate, sir. That's what I was going to say.
And
the heavier plate.
I think, is that Mukul speaking?
Yeah.
Oh, hi.
Because you didn't say, I was trying to put in what you do into this, but you came.
No.
You can help her.
Yeah. What Nishid say, I agree. There are two small things I'd like to. I also learnt it by listening to others, and that put arch bar from 7 to 7, upper maxillary, from 7 to 7 arch bar, not up to 6, and see that you lock. Intermaxillary locking is done, and make sure that the 7 is occludes properly with upper 7. That tells you that the mandibular body is now in alignment. Okay, and so that is one method of holding the mandible. But even if the tooth is properly occluded, the inferior border can still flare. So then you ask that there is a particular term used for pushing the angles. Edward Ellis has only given a name to that technique. When you put, Edward Ellis, I think Mukul, we had gone to Munich, and there Edward Ellis gave a very interesting suggestion. He said to push those angles medially. You know what he said? That use a pelvis, when a pelvis fractures, pelvis reduction forceps. So when a pelvis fractures, pelvis has to be compressed. Pelvis has to be compressed. So use a pelvis reduction forceps. The old orthopedic surgeons used to use it. Use a pelvis reduction forceps on both the angles, push the angles inside, and then you put a 6-hole thick plate, like a reconstruction plate, bend it along the inferior border. And I remember one more point is, you say periosteal elevator, feel the lingual cortex, not just feel, but under vision see that the lingual cortices are properly reduced. A slight overriding is even recommended. And then you put this heavily bent plate, and then you put 2 plates, of course, one at the inferior border, one above. Not only that, I have one more suggestion which I tell my friends and my students is, immediate post-operative, you put an elasto crepe bandage which keeps, and put a few pads, Gamgee pads on the angles, and put an elasto crepe bandage and maintain this pressure for the next 4 to 6 weeks. Especially where you have a bilateral subcondylar fracture, grossly displaced, angles flared, and you have a big midline fracture or a bilateral parasymphysial fracture where there is absolutely no control over this. So it depends upon the situation. Sometimes you get a fracture with just no displacement, midline fracture, very little displacement, so bilateral subcondylar, there is no flare. So you have to go by the case. But thank you for asking. I appreciate. But Nitin, you have I'm sorry, Nishit, you are doing a very good presentation. Let me tell you that. Thank
Sir,
you.
do you use bicortical screws for the lower border?
Yes, I would love to put. I would use to bicortical only because you have to have a real rigid control. It depends upon the kind of case you have got. You have to select. Now, if you have with minimally displaced, then you don't have to do many things.
This is not an issue.
Yeah, I guess. Hello.
Ital, that's me.
Yeah, I guess Jayesh sir is also there. Welcome, Jayesh sir. Sir, would you like to join? Add up something to this? Hello.
Yeah, thank you, doctor. Everything
Hi,
is
sir.
fine.
Sheetal, sorry, Hirkani. We have Dr. Vidya Ratan from the Post Institute in Chandigarh. Dr. Vidya, would you have what's your take on endoscopic repair? I mean, your center is a very well-developed center. So do you have any experience with this? I think Dr. Vidya, you may not have heard.
Okay. So there are a couple of questions which the students have asked. Should I go ahead with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Nishit?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's somebody has asked about your experience with extracorporeal method of condylar fracture.
No experience.
Okay. Do you have any experience with axial anchor screws and ninja plates for fixing the condyle?
No.
And rhytidectomy approach for the condylar fracture?
Rhytidectomy is fine. It is. I have not used it per se, but I don't think there is any issue with a rhytidectomy approach.
But I think we basically are more comfortable using other approaches, the retromandibular than the rhytidectomy approach.
Yeah,
why do you need to go with such a huge, big approach? That is your anterior parotid, basically.
Yes, TMAP technique.
TMAP,
right?
transmesenteric anterior parotid.
Yeah. There's one more question. Zaki wants to ask you: in bilateral condylar fracture, is it necessary to plate both the condyles? And if only one has to be plated, which one will you plate?
Which one will you plate if both of them are dislocated? Yes, both have to be plated. If it's dislocated, they will need to be plated. Current consensus, I don't know if there is a current consensus there for bilateral plating. But then if you ask people who do the plating, they say if you can plate one, why don't you want to plate the second one?
Right. Okay. So it's a surgeon's choice, I guess. And
the surgeon's choice, because if you plate one side and then you put the patient into say an intermaxillary fixation for 14 days or whatever, if you try those methods, then what is the point of plating one? So the whole purpose of an open reduction internal fixation should be to avoid the period of IMF that we are technically giving them.
Right.
Bit of guiding elastic is okay. So maybe I feel if one side is dislocated, the other is not dislocated, just displaced, as what Edward Ellis was saying, you try to put it into occlusion. If you're able to achieve occlusion without issues, I think you can just leave it.
Right. Okay, there's someone, Shruti, she wants to know that why do you fix the dentate segment first?
Ed Ellis says so. That's my answer basically.
Stable platform, you do it first.
Because see, it was my final Viva question. When I said you play the dentate segment first, all four had raised their eyebrows this way. What? But since it was end of 3 hours, they let me go.
Yeah, actually it had happened with me also in I-bombs. Like the surgeon did not agree with fixing the dentate segment first. They wanted to fix first the ramal segment to get that ramal height. So it depends on your
yes. Depends whom you follow.
Sheetal, just 1 minute before you ask. Jayesh, I think, was shy in speaking. It is the change in the vertical ramus height and neurological issues which is the deciding factor for open surgery. That's just a suggestion that he gave, a tip that he gave.
Okay.
Thank you, Jayesh.
Okay. Sir, are there any more questions?
No, not yet.
Okay. So, Nishit, I guess you can move ahead.
Continue?
Yeah.
Okay. Fine. As I said, intraoral endoscopic repair, I just spoke of it. I don't have first-hand experience with it. Controversies initially were 1.5 versus 2 mm plates. I think it's more or less agreed that it has to be a 2 mm plate. Single plate versus 2 plates, we've already spoken. 2 plates are always better. Sequencing, we just spoke. Multiple fractures of mandible. Ed Ellis says the mandible dentate segment first. In pediatric condylar fracture, open versus closed, currently a debatable issue. But then I have an article reference for it, which is a European consensus conference kind of a thing, where they have some consensus on part of the problem. Just a couple of photographs to show. A single plate, 2 plates. This is a delta plate from KLS Martin, I believe. It's used by a friend of mine. Okay. Gives complications associated with condylar fractures. Early complications due to the fracture, you can have a tympanic plate fracture, a glenoid fossa fracture, that is your middle cranial fossa, damage to your 5th and 7th cranial nerve, vascular injury. Late complications, if you leave it untreated, could be malocclusion. Now, this patient technically is operated for Lefort fracture, parasymphysis, and condyle, where the condyle was left, operated somewhere. And now this is at the end of 2 months. So he was referred to the dentist for dental rehab. Now, in such cases, I think orthognathic is probably the only option. Maybe seniors would be able to guide us with this. Patient doesn't come back when you say orthognathic, but growth disturbances in pediatric fractures, TM joint dysfunction, ankylosis. Surgical complications, hematoma, facial nerve injury or paresis, usually resolves in 6 months. Scar, I think we can manage it well. Silocele or a salivary fistula. If you manage the silocele, fistula formation is rare. Malocclusion, if you take care, can be avoided. Avascular necrosis, extracorporeal condylar plating does lead to avascular necrosis. And a lot of times in cases where it does not lead to avascular necrosis, you will still have some amount of bone resorption. There's a study which states that plate fracture is seen in single plates. TMJ ankylosis, if at all the patient is not mobilized. This is a Synthes plate which has fractured. I will have a question for maybe one of the seniors. W sir could answer. So this is a Synthes plate which has fractured twice in the same patient. W sir?
Hello, Ashok sir, are you there?
Yeah. I'm there.
Operated by my friend. Operated by a friend in Noida.
Yeah. We have like Mukul, Jayesh, we have number of fracture plates known to us. But it's so frustrating. It happens. Then we blame that why didn't you put a second plate? Why did you put only one plate? And then why did you use? We have had fractures from various foreign companies.
Yeah, so this is a Synthes.
Yeah. We have had. I will not name, but we have had different companies plates. So I don't know. There's some. You don't know. I have. In olden days, I have put Jayesh and me in 90s. We have put stainless steel plate. That has also sometimes given problem. AO used to have produced stainless steel.
This is a second plate fracture for the same patient. If you notice,
now
there's a small hole. That was a hole from the previous plate.
Yeah, it may be. There is some. There is one good suggestion which we should take. What is the commonest cause of this plate fracture is the fracture ends do not, the very simple reason that they are not healed. See, they are not united. If the fracture had healed, now what prevents healing of fracture is that the condylar end, it moves because of lateral pterygoid. Lateral pterygoid pull is strong. So now all over the world, many people do is at the end of the operation, inject Botox in the lateral pterygoid. So for the next 6 to 8 weeks, the Botox remains paralyzed. I mean, the lateral pterygoid remains paralyzed. Now we will see fractures after Botox, then we'll talk about it.
Yes.
But I think the minimum is to put 2 plates, not 1 plate, put 2 plates and give Botox. Then second thing is, many of us have learned the hard way. I used to get, when I meet my friends, we used to get overjoyed with good reduction and good post-op radiograph reduction. And the patient used to ask in 2 weeks' time, maybe, "Arey, khao, kuch bhi khao." that is where we have to learn that one should be happy with that the patient is able to open mouth, talk and take soft diet. Let him not load his jaw, so to say, not to eat. And once the mouth opens, no, you can't stop a patient from eating hard food. Okay, correct. Thank you. Thank you, Irfan. And thank you, Nishit.
Dabir sir. Sir,
call me Ashok, yaar.
No, sir. I'll call you Dabir sir.
Okay.
Sir, you are my guru. Sir, there is a question with your vast experience. You might kind of guide us. The question is, which is the the approach that could lead to the highest incidence of Frey syndrome? Now, this is something, I think we are dealing with a hypothetical thing. Unless so, which approach will lead to maximum incidence of Frey syndrome?
No, actually, I may be senior, but there are more, like Jayesh, Mukul, and you guys have more experience. You do more work. So, Frey syndrome, honestly, I have not seen a single case of Frey syndrome. I thought you were going to talk about facial now. We could have said something. Yeah. But Frey's I have not seen. Ask Jayesh or Mukul or somebody. Or Nishit might tell.
No, sir. I have not even come across this as a complication in whatever I read.
But Nishit, I guess you mentioned about the sialocele once you experienced that. How did you manage that?
Sialocele, that was because that's a leakage from the parotid gland.
Yeah. So how do you go about it?
Aspiration and pressure.
That's it.
Okay. Can I suggest one small thing?
Yes, sir.
I would suggest a drug which will reduce salivary secretion.
I will try taking it.
What you should consider is glycopyrrolate. Give oral unless there is a gross contraindication to glycopyrrolate in a patient. Otherwise, we have had salivary fistula and all that. So we give, first is to see that area remains clean, and give continue antibiotic for some time and give glycopyrrolate, reduces secretion, and they are healed. We have not had a patient who continues to have a salivary fistula.
Okay, sir.
Okay, Nishit, go ahead. We'll have two questions at the fag end. Yeah, at the end. Yeah.
TMJ ankylosis as a complication in condylar. Now, this was the paper that I was talking about. This is a position paper from the IBRA, International Bone Research Association, on surgery of the head. That is the second international symposium for condylar fracture osteosynthesis, Marseille, France. Okay. Now here they have mentioned that the preauricular and the submandibular or the angular. What they mean by angular is a periangular or a high submandibular approach, but the most selected for open reduction. Now this conference had around 12 or 14 experts and another 40 group of surgeons and different scenarios where they have given a consensus as to what each one would do. So transoral and endoscopic approaches, they have said use for selective laterally displaced condylar base fracture because it is difficult to master them. And endoscopic management should be attempted only if an open surgery can be performed. So if at all you can't plate it, or if you are unsuccessful with your endoscopic management, you can just go ahead and complete the treatment. 3D trapezoidal plates or 2 straight 4-hole mini plates to be used for condylar neck and base fractures. By rule, pediatric fractures less than 6 years of age do a non-surgical management. Although there are reports from people where they have fixed screws into medial head fractures. I have not included too much of pediatric condylar trauma because that itself is quite a big topic to speak, and it's the most controversial part. Pediatric fractures between 6 to 12 years of age, there was no consensus because there were people who were speaking in favor of open treatments and in favor of closed. Whereas pediatric fractures above 12 years of age, it is considered that you should treat it like an adult fracture. And majority of the experts have voted against resorbable plates. So conclude, I say treatment of choice for both displaced and dislocated condylar base and neck fractures is an open reduction, internal fixation. Now it offers better functional outcome than closed treatment. Non-surgical treatment of displaced condylar fractures is linked to long-term complications such as clicking or TM joint pain. Now, open reduction should be performed in all condylar fractures with a deviation of 10 to 45 degrees or a shortening of the ramus by more than 2 millimeters, irrespective of the fracture level, be it a condylar base, neck, or a condylar head fracture. 2 mini plates fixed at the anterior and posterior surfaces can better neutralize the functional stress occurring on the condylar neck. So this I had mentioned that during mastication, highest level of tensile strain is on the anterior and lateral surface, whereas compression, maximum compression is on the posterior surface of the condylar neck. Thank you.
Thanks, Nishit.
Thank you, Nishit. Sir, do you have question? I had actually a couple of questions to ask Nishit.
You ask, then maybe before you ask, I'll just ask.
Okay.
Liz Mohanty wants to know whether there's any, horizons in or newer developments in fracture of the condyle. I think not fracture of the condyle, but management of fracture of condyle.
So I missed your question. There was some disturbance.
Yeah, the question is, what is the latest development in management of fractures of condyle? Like technologically or something.
Technologically, either your geometrical plates.
Yes.
And the perimeter approach is the latest one.
Yeah, endoscopic also.
An endoscopic approach.
Yeah. Sheetal, go ahead.
Okay. Nishit, this is about the access. Like I want to ask about your experience, whether there's any difference in the access for the medially displaced condyle and the laterally displaced condyle, or do you go with your retromandibular approach only?
I usually go with the retromandibular. Whether it is medially displaced or laterally displaced, more than that, it is the location of the fracture, whether it is a higher neck or a lower neck or a subcondyle, which will, practically, guide us with the approach.
Okay.
Otherwise, I don't think, because if it's a medially dislocated fracture, you are going to convert it into a laterally dislocated before you plate it.
Oh, okay. That's good. Okay. And since you are well versed with the TMJ, you've been doing TMJ surgery, I just wanted to ask you whether you really look for the disc or whether you have done this to look for the disc before,
I have not done. There is still, I have not found a consensus paper on that. There are articles from a lot of, I think the article that I have is from a Chinese.
Dogma. Yeah.
No, not Dongmai. Dongmai doesn't do that. Dongmai does more of TMJ disc displacement surgery. She is not too much into trauma.
Okay.
This is from another unit where they have done repositioning of the disc in most of the places. A few people say when you get the condyle back, the disc comes back with it.
Okay.
I personally don't have an experience with that. I have not yet tried it.
Right.
Mukul sir can tell us.
Yeah, but Hirkani, can I talk a little? I agree with Nishit. In fact, many a times you don't necessarily open up the capsule while fixing up a subcondyle fracture. I'm not good.
I think there's an issue with the Mumbai.
Yeah. His voice is not there.
Mukul, we've lost audio contact with you.
To look for the disc, you'll have to possibly be too much of a thing where you do a subcondyle. It's still lying on the head of the condyle, but it's worthwhile. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Mukul, can you? No, we lost you. For a brief moment. Can you just repeat what you said?
Yeah. See, there is a what Hirkani asked a very nice question, that whether you look for the disc, and there are certain. In fact, I remember listening to some Chinese speaker who talked about repositioning disc in every condylar fractures, and we also have done some scopies in our condylar fracture patients to look for the disc and try and reposition it during our condylar fractures. But there are 2-3 things which I feel. One is when you do a subcondylar fracture, you don't necessarily open up. You don't go onto the condylar head and actually look for the disc. You'll have to do more of a surgery to look for the disc. That is one. Secondly, if the disc is still attached to the condyle, which it is, if you reduce the condyle, the disc will come back to its normal position. So I don't feel you need to really look for the disc. Only worthwhile, possibly I can think, is a young patient where they say the chances of ankylosis are higher because the disc has moved medially and not lying in the condyle, where you feel the reposition of the disc, the chance of ankylosing will be much lesser than what you'll see in other patients. This is what I feel, Nishit, and my experience as far as this goes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Rama sir, do we have further questions?
You have, or should I ask? There's a question. Yeah, there's a question here. What is the rationale of condylar resorption post reduction ORIF in condylar fractures? Condylar resorption following open reduction.
Condylar resorption following open reduction will only be if you have really stripped off all the blood supply and converted it into a free graft.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there is no reason why it should resorb. Yeah. Or if there is an arthritic change.
Yes.
Rama sir, can I ask a little bit? Sorry, I missed out. My connectivity was a little low. Nishit, I want to know what is your post-operative regime for an open reduction? Do you really put in elastics post-surgery?
I do put elastics, guiding elastics basically.
Yeah. And the diet?
I keep them on soft diet, sir.
For how long?
Usually 2 to 3 weeks at least.
Yeah, because me and Dr. Dabir were in fact just discussing the other day regarding how long this should be, because we have literally seen 1 or 2 condylar fracture plating which we had done, and the plates fracturing, when the patient was put under load, and though not hard diet, even by patient having some soft diet. So sir is insisting on absolutely semi-solid diet, which I was trying to. Sir is still there. Which I was trying to say that we should shift the patient onto little soft diet at least.
No, I just now mentioned, Mukul, I just now said that. We have burnt our fingers.
Sorry, yeah. That's what I'm trying to. Elastics. Okay.
Mukul, I even suggested that this, injecting Botox in medial pterygoid when you do it, so reduce, avoid the pull on of lateral pterygoid. I think it's a very good idea. Excellent idea.
Nishit, question. How would you sequence a bilateral parasymphysis fracture with a bilateral body fracture? What is your sequence for open reduction?
Bilateral parasymphysis with bilateral body.
Body, yeah. I mean, they're very close to each other.
Yeah. So I think one side at a time. I don't know how to answer this question technically. So there is no condylar fracture in this case.
There would be, there's no condyle in this. So basically, they are close to each other. I think I would go in for an extraoral open reduction if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, extraoral or intraoral, so whichever you choose. Since you're talking of bilateral parasymphysis and body, now you plate, convert it into bilateral body or bilateral parasymphysis.
A degloving incision type.
Yeah, that should be good enough instead of an extraoral. I don't know, maybe probably Dabir sir must have seen those cases. I have not come across a case where I have had bilateral parasymphysis and bilateral body.
I could imagine a bilateral condylar fracture with a parasymphysis. That is
exactly.
In a motor vehicle accident.
This fellow must have been beaten badly.
Possible. But then it doesn't usually follow the pattern of coup and
follow the pattern, exactly. It doesn't follow the pattern.
Okay.
It can be somebody who's really been beaten up.
Yes. By a surgeon, possibly.
Yeah, possibly, because he knows where to hit, no?
Sheetal, go ahead.
Okay. So, are we having further questions or should we conclude the session?
Yeah, but before we conclude, if there are no more questions, I have there's one. There's one question.
Your voice is.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi. Good evening. Hi, sir.
Yes. Okay.
Hello.
Am I audible?
So there is an echo of the.
Is it better if I text?
No, I think Dr. Nishit should stop sharing his screen. Okay?
Sorry?
Dr. Nishit should stop sharing his screen so that Benoiter shares his screen.
Yeah, I have stopped sharing.
Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, good evening, Dr. Nishit. Very nice presentation. What I would like to ask is, there is an elderly lady or a man about 80 plus with a bilateral condyle fracture. One side is a low subcondyle, which can be easily plated, and the other side, let's say, has a sagittal condylar head fracture.
Okay.
And the lady or this person lives alone at home. How would you go about managing this case? Like, would you definitely I would think of plating one side, but how would you manage the other side, which has a high head fracture sagittally?
Dentate patient or edentulous?
Dentate patient with malocclusion. The worry here is putting on MMF postoperatively in somebody who lives alone and who's elderly.
No, it's now if you are looking at only the alone part, then it's like managing a surgery with the patient alone. Right.
How do you manage this case per se for the patient, for the benefit of the patient?
No, for the benefit. Now, how much is the malocclusion?
Significant as of now.
So if you're looking at a lower subcondylar fracture or a base, so if you say if there's a significant, there's no concomitant fracture, right?
No, not in the anterior part, no.
No anterior, no maxilla.
No.
So you're looking at a dislocated fracture. If there is a significant malocclusion with a subcondylar fracture on one side and a condylar medial pole, a condylar head fracture.
Yeah.
Just a medial pole fracture, you said, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Where the height is maintained.
Correct.
Right? So it has to be a dislocated fracture on the other side, which surely requires plating. I don't think there's anything else that should be done or can be done.
No, that requires plating. What would you do for the right side?
Keep in mind, if you can see if the height is maintained except for the pain part, I think the patient should be able to be, put in occlusion manually. So you can just either give guiding elastics as an initial relief from pain.
Okay.
Can I ask Nishit?
Yes, sir. So you can add.
Yes, you can't ask such difficult questions, okay, on this forum. It's meant for easy questions, postgraduate students. How are you doing?
No,
I have said, if you're going to do open reduction for one and going to do a close treatment for the other, would it not be beneficial for the 80-year-old to do close treatment for both? I mean, you're going to
there's a dislocated fracture.
If it's badly dislocated, yes. Otherwise, for an 80-year-old, I would not like to do it to my mother. If you're going to do close treatment.
So if it is not dislocated, then there is no reason why the patient should really have too much of an occlusal discrepancy.
Right. Right. And why, yes, you feel you can't do wiring and some elastic traction even if she's single, you can still give, you do not lock the mouth per se.
Yeah.
But I think even you do open reduction, if she's going to be staying alone, that is going to be a problem for her even otherwise also. So I don't think staying alone really should change your treatment plan. She should. This is what I feel.
Okay.
I'm sure there are people can, but I feel staying alone, because she should find some way, or that should not, because even if you do open reduction as Nishit wants to do, you will again require a lot of post-op care for that patient. Will have so much.
No, I mean why I asked this question. If I want to treat the other side conservatively, and if I do minimal MMF, in case I the occlusion or maintain the weight, just worried about when help is wanted or she's sleeping. I'm just thinking on those lines. One side definitely needs to be open, and the other side, if you have to manage conservatively, how much and how long of MMF. And I don't give rigid MMF at all. It's always elastic.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Conservative need not always be MMF.
No.
Exactly. So if the height is maintained, I don't see a reason why she should be put in.
Yeah, don't lock mouth at all.
Yeah.
Just put on soft diet and just have it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can hear an echo. Can everybody hear the echo, or is it only me?
I can't hear an echo, but anyways.
Probably my.
Okay, this is. Thank you, Abhilasha.
There's a lot of echo.
I Mukul's driving.
Rama sir.
Yes.
Shenoy sir.
Yeah.
You've become the Krishna. CIMS.
Not the Krishna. This is the team
Exactly.
that works.
Rama is always like this. He's always been the Krishna from childhood.
Yeah, out of the 17 cousins, one of the 3. And in my class, so anyway, these are the people who work hard. I'm the one who works hardly.
किसी का तो डिवाइस डबल डिवाइस चालू है.
Double device है.
Mukul is there. I mean, I can see only 4. Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Nishit, for a wonderful presentation. And Abhilasha, I think I would like to share my screen now. So
Yes, sir. I'll stop.
Brinda, Madhumati, and Abhilasha. So they work.
Thank you, sir.
They do a great job, right? And of course, Nishit, you did a wonderful job. So much. Your job should not. Thank you so much. And Eetal, this is.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you for always being there.
The great success for this webinars is basically dependent on the speaker as well as the moderator. So both of you did a great job. Thank you.
Yeah, great job, Erkane, as well as Nishit. Excellent job. And Rama, kudos to your entire team. Keep it up.
Thank you, sir.